I've got this spun around today. It is pouring down rain, and I'm hoping this might work. Can't really see a lot now. Topic today to babble about. It's 9:50 in the morning here, so I don't know if anybody's going to be up this time of the day. I'm only on my headset because I can't hear very well from the rain. I don't even know. This is Highway 59, southbound. I lived in Meridian a little while ago. Like I said, it's pouring down rain. That's why I have this spun around and you can't see out the windshield. I can't hear myself thinking. The plan for today, I was going to try to drive home. I was going to try to drive through the night. Because of the huge delays yesterday, I had to get out of there about 4 o'clock, so I drove until I dropped, which was only about 450 miles, and that was around midnight. Around midnight. I got zoned, so I pulled no rest there. I woke up, started driving like 7 o'clock this morning, so I've been on the road a couple hours. And because of the distance involved, it was still 950 miles to Laredo, and I'm due tomorrow morning. Again, the plan was to go home, but that didn't work out. So I'm going to go straight to Laredo, and it's showing me getting there about 10 o'clock tonight. Laredo time. And like I said, I got the camera spun around because it is pouring down rain. I can't hear myself think, and you can't see the software in the back right now. I'm the first comment. Yes, you are. You're running. What's the word? I can't read it. I don't know. Okay, well, hi everybody. Yeah, like I said, I got the camera spun around because of the rain. I can't see anything out the windows right now. Traffic is mild. I'm on I-59, or Highway 59, south of Meridian, Mississippi. I'm trying to intercept I-10, and I'm going to chase I-10 all the way. Where are you driving? Again, 59 south, out of Meridian, Mississippi. Going to hit 10, and I'm going to Laredo. Non-stop here. I just gotta get down there. I'll be there at 10 o'clock tonight. My drop is at 8 in the morning, and then I'm gonna head back home by Houston. I got some stuff I gotta do this week. So I was lucky I got a load coming down here. Yeah, it's been pouring down rain for the last hour. The advantage of that is it feels all the bugs off the windshield. Something I was listening to earlier, the Soviet Union So after World War II, they were developing aircraft, and one of their commercial passenger jets, this is first generation jet. Damn it, yeah, it is right. It's falling silly right now. They made a jet called the Tupelo 104 that ultimately had an atrociously bad safety record. And they quit making them in 1960, but they couldn't admit that they had a bad aircraft. They were convinced theirs was the greatest ever. So on a civilian market, I thought you're in a car. No, I'm in a van. I actually drive a Ford Transit van. This is a 50 model medium roof extended. I used to have the tall roof, long van, but it costs an extra $20,000+. It gets about 25% mileage. Less than this one, and you really don't use that space. It's nice to have, because I'm 6'4", you can walk around in here. I got a stoop in this one. I mean, it's nice to have that room, but for what purpose? This is right here, that's my bed. There's my blanket right behind me. I don't know if you can see that. But that folds up, by the way. And I actually folded it up to pick up this load, and then I found out the pallets were this big, so it drops off. So I was able to do some fun. So anyway, the Soviets made this horrible passenger jet called the Tupelo 104. They finally stopped making it in 1960. They took it out of service with the airliner in the 60s. But the military held on to theirs. And in 1981, the Soviet military, remember the Soviet? Is there a tornado going on? Yeah, the rain is really hard. That's why I'm on headset. Can you hear me okay? I can't tell. I'm talking to myself right now. But in 1981, the Soviet military had a meeting with all the head top gurus in their Pacific fleet. They all came together in one spot. And the admirals, the vice admirals, and their aides and their command staff. It was some outlying area where they had the meeting. They came together, did their thing, and they were getting ready to leave. So they had everybody on the same plane. And the plane went down the runway, came off the ground, flew, I think they said 7 or 8 seconds, stalled out on the wing, waited for it, crashed, killed everybody. The go back to your house. Yes, that's the plan. Tomorrow. I gotta make it all the way to Laredo for it to get rid of this. So this plane picked up, went inverted, crashed, and in 1981, in the paranoia, they thought that World War III was kicking off, and they thought this was the opening shot of the Americans by taking out their entire command staff. And they alerted the entire Pacific Fleet to get ready for the conflict. You can't hear me? I can't hear you. So my voice isn't coming over? I'm sorry, you can't hear what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm wired in right here. Turn that off. Somebody let me know. Can you hear the sound of my voice, or is it drowned out, or is it just not working? Hello? Anybody? I can hear. Aha! Somebody can hear me. All right. Where I was. Anyway, the Soviets decided that this plane crash was orchestrated by the Americans somehow. And this was the opening shots of the war by taking out the command staff. So they alerted everybody in the Pacific Fleet, get ready for conflict to start, get ready for, did you say? What did you just say? And they waited, there's nothing happening. So they decided the Americans shot it down with a missile, but they're all watched it crash, there was no missile. So then they decided, obviously the Americans planted a bomb in the plane or something. And there was no evidence of that. Then they decided somebody at the base is talking about a plane crash. Yes, plane crash. And then they said somebody at the base was mad and bombed the plane. Then it was somebody took the guys out because he wanted to eliminate them. So there were 44 people on the plane, by the way, to take them out so somebody could move up and take their positions. They looked around, they found one guy that wasn't on the flight that was the next in line if somebody died. So immediately all the attention went on him, and it turns out he stayed back because his daughter lived there. She was hanging out with his daughter. So that, they said, no, that's not him. He wasn't my cousin. They had black boxes back there. They got the black box out of the plane. And the plane had a takeoff speed. There's a car in the ditch over there. Huh, that was interesting. The plane's takeoff speed is something like 220 miles an hour or 2 kilometers or whatever. And it turns out the plane took off at 180. And they said that it should have done that. And they also found out the controls, the pilot did not pull the controls back to bring the plane off the ground. Oh, that's interesting. So it wasn't pilot induced. And it took a long time to come up with the answer. Well, it turns out that these people met at this base, and in the Soviet Union of that era, you couldn't get consumer goods unless you were in Moscow. You had to go to Moscow to get it. And all these guys who were stationed all over the place, all came to this base. It was by Moscow, and while they were there, everybody went on an excursion into downtown to buy whatever they needed. Clothes, they had canned goods, oranges, all kinds of weird stuff you can't get out in the field. But they came back, and this plane, looks like about the size of a 727. Then you add 44 bodies, and everybody's got an incredible amount of cargo. And the pilots, there's only so much weight you can put in an airplane. And they start overloading the aircraft with all this stuff, and the pilots, who are military officers, go, hey, I can't carry all this. And I tell you what, from being in the military, when you have a crew, you have the pilot and the co-pilot military aircraft. The pilot in command is in charge of the aircraft. And the U.S. military had to change that to make sure that was the rule, because you would have a second lieutenant fly in a plane, and a general gets on board and says, hey, lieutenant, fly over there. And the pilot says, I can't, that's not safe, I'm not allowed, whatever. And if I'm a general, you'll do what I say. And then something happens, the plane crashes, gets shot down, and his fault is the pilot in command. He should have gone over there. So they had to change the rules, and I've actually dealt with this, where the pilot in command is subservient to the commander, the person, his boss, when the aircraft's on the ground, but as soon as it's airborne, it's yours. And without boring you with the details, as a former attack helicopter pilot, there was an incident where I was told, myself and the Mike, the guy who flew it, were told we had to carry a certain payload on our aircraft, and we said we don't want to carry that because that's not going to be full, and it's just excess weight. And he said, you're going to carry that. Well, we put on with rocket pods, and rocket pods don't really work in a hard war. We had rocket pods on board. We overloaded the aircraft with weapons that we wanted, and because we were ordered to, and we took off, and we hovered up and hit the jettison button and dropped the rocket pods on the ground. So we were legal because we were flying, and now we're in charge. And so it was whoop, pop, pop, and he never said a word to us. But anyway, you've got this flight crew who are military officers telling these a high-ranking general, you can't do this or you can't do that. Now imagine if you had 40 of them on board. Telling one admiral no, telling 40, yeah, that's not going anywhere. So they wildly overload the aircraft. And the people loading the aircraft aren't flight crew members. They're just random clowns that are driving delivery trucks, and they're just throwing boxes in the cargo hold. And the pilot said, we can't carry all this. And again, they don't want to hear it. So they throw all this junk on board. Crew gets in, and at the last second, another truck pulls up and puts 2 gigantic rolls of paper for newspaper. Another car in the ditch. Huh. They're rolls. It's to make newspaper. Again, this is back in the old days. Newspaper, it's a thing you read in and these rolls weighed 1,000 pounds each, and they threw these in the cargo bed. Not put in by flight crew. The flight crew doesn't know they're there. And they're not secured. They lay them in the cargo bed. So the plane goes to take off, goes rolling down the runway, gets up to something less than flying speed. The airfoil is hitting the aircraft, so it causes, because it's already tail heavy to begin with. So the aircraft pitches up, and those 2 rolls roll back to the end. That's 2,000 pounds moved to the ass end of the plane that's already overloaded and rear end heavy. And the plane goes takes off below flying speed, pitches up. You can push the yoke forward all you want. You don't have control. Your weight and balance. You're outside of your center of gravity. And it pitched up and went in, and that's what killed it. So it was arrogance, stupidity, and people, you can't tell them anything because they have on the rank on their shirt that caused the death of 44 people plus the flight crew, which is like 3 or 4 more people all over that. Wow. And I just heard a story. I just listened to a long story about that. Because anytime, and this happens here in the United States, anytime an air crash happens, there's always the initial, we think it was this. This is what caused this to happen. And with 0 exceptions, it always turns out to be something else. Always turns out to be something else. It's weird, and they're able to track those things down. My one, as a pilot, I had one incident, we call it a forced landing. And what happened to us is I was flying out in the Gulf, the oil and gas industry, and I was flying a Bell Long Ranger. The Jet Ranger stretch just got extra row seats. And the aircraft, it's hot, it's miserable, it's sticky, it's summertime. I had my regular 3 guys on board, so what you do on these hot days is you take off and you climb, and once you get over about 1,500 feet, the temperature drops. We had a 100-mile hop to go back to our platform, so I dropped my guys off. Well, I remember this. West Cam 237, this is going back to 2015. West Cam 237 went into camera, got gas, came out, these guys came up, got in, and we took off. We climbed to 1,500 feet. And this was a 1970s airframe, older aircraft. And there's 2 engines. There was a C-20 or a C-30. And the C-30 was the good engine, and the C-20 was the trash engine. And the C-20 was an older, cheap motor. It was garbage. The company I flew for was garbage. And how a turbine engine operates is it runs at a constant speed, and you just pull power as needed. And if you have too much power, this bleed band that wraps around the motor actually opens up and lets air out. It's just how the turbine works. And these engines were so old and they ran so incredibly hot, they actually took off the bleed band and covered the holes so the air couldn't get out, just to keep it cool. And the backside of that is you couldn't fly over 3,000 feet above sea level because the bleed band wasn't there, which was fine for what we did. But when you took off this aircraft and you pulled up to your cruising altitude, your torque, how much power you're actually pulling, would go down. So you would pull up and 80% was cruise power. So and it would drop down a couple and you go to 80. And then when you get to the backside, you start your descent, and you're going down, you roll out at 500 feet. And then the torque would be a little higher, so you would ease the power down. And that was the range of motion. Well, I took off, climbed up to 1,500 feet, and the power was a little off, but a little lower than normal. And I pulled on it, and the rotor started to slow just a little bit. I felt the rotor slow down. Now, the old Long Ranger is a totally uncomputerized aircraft. Everything's manual. So it's just a throttle. You roll your throttle, you leave it at 100%. If your turbine or rotor is off, there's a little button on the controls that says increase, decrease, INC, or finger dinger. That's like your governor. And I pulled power and the rotor dipped. I reduced power and I pushed on the anchor thinking the governor was a little off, and then I pulled power and the rotor dipped down more, and then I went flat pitch and started my descent and realized this isn't working. And I went to flat pitch out of rotation. When flat pitch, the helicopter, the rotor system is supposed to unlatch from the engine. There's like a clutch. But this engine came off so slowly the clutch didn't disengage. So as my rotor, as I'm letting the aircraft fall out of the sky, the rotor didn't let go. So instead of flying at 100%, which is where you keep your rotor turbine, I was at 85%. And we're coming down. And below 70%, you're not flying. The aircraft's no longer an aircraft now, it's a school bus. So we're in this fast descent. And I made a radio call and said, hey, we're going to the drink, and I got a failure-ish. I'm not sure what it is, but it's not working. My 3 guys that I've been carrying for the last year and a half are sitting there, and before you take off and land out over the water, you have pontoons. They're like in a bag on the skid. Arm system. Pull the trigger and it pops. They blow open. But you arm it every time you take off and land. You always arm that system. So we're pulling out of the sky, and I made all my radio calls, and then I reached over and pulled the trigger, and the pontoons popped open, and the guy in the back seat goes, "You're serious?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, okay, I didn't know you were serious." So we're coming down really hard because I don't have my rotor speed where you're supposed to have it. And you get down at the bottom and you flare, so you're moving this way, but when you flare, you give up this for this. So you kind of honk back on it. We got over the water, we went to set it down, and an old Army trick, if you're going to go in the drink, you spread your legs so your stick doesn't break the body part. It slammed into the water, and we sank about this deep in the water for about 10 seconds and popped back out of the water. And the aircraft didn't flip over, which is meant to control. And ultimately, they pulled the aircraft apart, and it turns out that it had just been overhauled by Honeywell. They did something wrong. They called it a low side governor failure. And our insurance company gave us a high five because it wasn't our fault that the engine rolled off like that. So that was kind of the cool thing. But there was all the speculation of what would cause it, and it came down to the computerized rebuild model didn't do something. They were able to track it to a overtorque bolt that bent something and caused a chain reaction and stuff. But there's all this speculation of, oh, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. Everybody had their 2 cents and all had their opinions on it. Like I said, it came out of there smelling like a rose. That was okay. It was a beautiful sunny day. One of the guys that was kind of new to the old young guy. He was out like 6 days offshore. Anyway, I was just listening to that what caused that. It's just following a trail of bad ideas that gets you there. You can't tell somebody, hey, this is we can, and they don't want to hear it. I got high rank and I don't want to hear it. Anyway, continuing southbound on 59, it is still pouring down rain. I looked at, I have an app on my phone called Storm Guard, and that kind of shows you what's happening. There's just rain all over the place. The upside of this is it kills the bugs off of it. So I got that on. 61 degrees. I like it when it cools off. I get tired of the beautiful summer out here, especially when you're sleeping in a van. All right. Well, I was just checking in with everybody today. It's a Sunday. I know probably not a lot going on, but according to this, I will be in Laredo at 10 o'clock tonight, and I'm going to run. I got to stop and get fuel. Other than that, I'm just going to run it straight through. So I've got 12 hours to go. So that's going to be a long day. I'm going 63, getting 21.2 miles per gallon. Driving in the rain costs gas mileage, by the way, because as you're going down the road, you're actually picking the water up with your tires, and that causes friction, it causes drag. A little side note, in case you're wondering. All right, I'll catch up with you guys later. Take care.